Imar. Hi, Debbie.
מה שלומך, כבוד הרב? אני לא שומע אותך.
יופי, היי דן. ברוך השם, הכל מצוין, תודה. מה איתך? בסדר?
בסדר.
Just waiting for people to come in.
Why are you eating again? Debbie, how are you?
Hi, Josh. Hi, Eric. Hi, Oli.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hi, Gabi.
Bye.
Hi, just wait one more minute and we'll begin.
Just so you know, Rabbi, I have about 20% left on my phone, FYI. So I might disappear somewhere along the way.
I shouldn't take it personally.
No, but just letting you know.
All right. Okay, let's start. Okay, so first of all, I apologize for the change of schedule. We had a book club which we have monthly, which has been going on for, I think, almost 8 years. And we know the Gemara says, Tadir v'she'eno tadir, tadir kodem. We have a klal in the Gemara that says, whatever is regular always takes precedence. So although this is a Torah class and that's a secular class, but first of all, it's a very important thing. You know, the Gemara says, Chochma b'goyim ta'amin, that there is Chochma in the world outside the world of Torah, and Mikol melamdai hiskalti, one should learn from every person, from every book, from every subject. Very important. You had a beautiful speaker who spoke this week about the Rambam. Rambam writes he learned his astronomy not from the Torah, from the outside world, And he said that's how he was able to understand some very difficult passages in the Torah. So, this book club has been going on so long. It's so incredible. I go every month. If you'd like to join, speak to Dan. He's here now. Don't speak to him now. I can speak to him after class, but it's really incredible. It's really actually very insightful. There's lots of incredible speakers and incredible topics. That being said, we are moving on with our regular agenda, and that's Parashat HaShavua. We are Parashat Toldot. Perek Chavhei Pasuk Yutet, chapter 25, Pasuk 19. Strongly recommend that you have a Chumash with a Rashi if you want to maximize the potential of this class. As usual, we go through the Pasukim and we go through the Rashi inside to see ultimately what's bothering Rashi. Ve'ele Toledot Yitzchak ben Abraham. So we're moving on very swiftly. We finished Parashat Chayei Sarah, where Abraham passes away, Sarah passes away, Ishmael passes away. Yitzchak is a miraculous birth. Before I forget, I just want to mention that today's class will be Leilui Nishmat, Orly's mother, Farcha Bat Simcha, that this class should be a aliyah for her neshama. So they all passed away, and the Yitzchak had a miraculous birth, or I suppose Abraham at the age of 99, and Sarah at the age of 90 gives birth to her precious son, Yitzchak, her first and only son, Yitzchak. Abraham had other children beforehand, right? Abraham had a son called Ishmael, who passed away at the end of the last week's parasha, and he was from his wife called Hagar. Abraham had also other children from another woman, essentially the same woman, Rashi says, we said last week, called Keturah. She was a tzadeket. She had other children. That was the end of last week's parasha. But ultimately from Sarah, only had one child, and his name was Yitzchak. So we begin the parasha, Ve'ele Toledot Yitzchak ben Abraham. Translate, and these are the offsprings of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Abraham holid et Yitzchak. Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So what's the obvious questions? Any of us?
Yeah. Abraham is a man, how can he give birth?
Sorry?
Abraham is a man, how can he give the birth?
Abraham is a man, how can he give birth? I don't know if that's such a strong question. I mean, we're talking about, Abraham's offsprings. It's his son, his child, who he gave birth to. I mean,
Double up.
when somebody says to you, Mazal Tov, I just had a baby, it doesn't mean you had a baby. Your wife had a baby, right? But same idea. Any other questions?
The reputation of Yitzchak ben Abraham, Abraham holid et Yitzchak. If he's the son of Abraham, obviously Abraham is the father.
So first of all, the first question is, there's a seeming repetition, seemingly there's a repetition over here. Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham. These are the offsprings of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Next words, Abraham holid et Yitzchak. Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So the first question is, Abraham was not the son of Yitzchak. When you talk about the offsprings of Abraham to Yitzchak, then what happens is, it's not actually Abraham who's giving birth to Yitzchak in this context, because we want to know about the children of Yitzchak, who are Yaakov and Esav, who we're going to see later on. But ultimately, it's not Abraham or Yitzchak. So seemingly, this pasuk is really a little bit strange. It should have said, Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham. Who are they? Yaakov and Esav. Or Esav and Yaakov. Esav was born first and Yaakov was born. So something is not flowing in this pasuk. Question number one. Question number two is, Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham. Okay, these are the offsprings of Yitzchak. Who is Yitzchak, by the way? Ben Abraham, the son of Abraham. Great. Abraham holid et Yitzchak. Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. In case you didn't know, Abraham was the one who gave birth to Yitzchak. What on earth is going on? We just said Yitzchak ben Abraham. Why the repetition of the same genealogy in the same pasuk? That is the first two questions, which obviously has been bothering Rashi. And Rashi immediately tackles them. Rashi says as follows: Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak. These are the offspring of Yitzchak. Who are they? Not Abraham or Yitzchak, because they're not the children. Yaakov ve'esav ha'amurim b'parasha. So Rashi is just pointing out, Ele toldot Yitzchak and Abraham is not necessarily referring to Abraham, who gave birth to Yitzchak, but obviously it's referring to what's coming after the Yaakov and Esav, who are going to be speaking about, we're going to be speaking about later on in the parasha. Next, Abraham holided Yitzchak. Back to our question, what's this piece in the pasuk coming to tell us? Seemingly it's out of place. We just said Yitzchak is the son of Abraham. Why are we adding in this piece of Abraham holid et Yitzchak? Says Rashi. לאחר שקרא הקדוש ברוך הוא שמו אברהם. After Abraham Avinu was called by God, Abraham, אחר כך הוליד את יצחק. Afterwards, he gave birth to Yitzchak. What does that mean? So Rashi's a little bit cryptic over here. To understand this Rashi, you have to go and reverse a little while to Perek Tet Vav, chapter 15, Pasuk Hey. If you turn back, look at chapter 15, Pasuk Hey. I'll read you the Rashi. Vayotze oto hachutz, a very famous pasuk. God takes Abraham outside. Vayomer, he says, habetna hashamayma, gaze towards the heavens, usfor hakochavim, and count the stars. Im tuchal lisfor otam, if you can count them. Vayomer lo ko yeh zarecha. And he said to him, just like you can't count the stars, so too shall be your offspring. Says Rashi, Vayotze oto hachutza. So Rashi says, simply, he literally took him out, go check out the stars. Rashi says, Ulefi midrasho, but Rashi quotes a midrash. He says, Amar lo tsei me'itztan geninut shelcha. Go out from your astrology. Go out from your astrological calculations. Shira'ita b'mazalot, because you saw in the signs of the zodiac, she'encha atid lahamid ben, that you, according to your nature, you will not be able to have children. Avram en lo ben, don't forget his name until now was Avram, without the hey. Aval Avraham yesh lo ben. But Avraham, with your new name, you're going to change your dimension. You're going to change your whole astronomy. Your whole system is going to change with this new name. That's why the name is so important. The name of a person is so important. And this will change you to be able to bear children. You know, we find this concept of changing names, bar minan, when a person is ill. Sometimes we add a name to a person to help their mother. Something to that. Ultimately, if we use that Rashi to explain this Rashi over here, it will make sense. Avraham holided Yitzchak. The stress on this pasuk is Avraham, the one who was holided Yitzchak. You want to know how Avraham was able to have children? Because the stress is on Avraham. His name was no longer Avram. It was actually Avraham. Says the pasuk, you know who's giving birth to Yitzchak? The change of the person, Avraham. And that's why the pasuk is highlighting this aspect. It's actually Avraham and not Avram who gave birth to Yitzchak. Rashi then quotes Davar Acher, an alternative perush in the pasuk. Quite a well-known perush, quite a well-known explanation. Says Rashi, Alidei shekatav hakatuv Yitzchak ben Avraham, huzkak lomar Avraham holided Yitzchak. The reason why the second part of the pasuk is put in there is because of the first line. The first line says, these are the offsprings of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. We need to insert some extra information here. Says Rashi, I'll tell you why. Lefi shahayu litzanei hador omrim, there was the scoffers of the generation, the cynics of the generation, were turning around, they were saying, Me'avimelech nit'abra Sarah. Shereka shanim shahata im Abraham, v'lo nit'abra himenu. So the cynics were turning around, they said like this. Let's go back a little bit. Last week's parasha, what happened? They said, you know that story with Abraham and Sarah, and they met up with Avimelech, and what happened was Avimelech got struck by God that he wouldn't be able to touch Sarah, but ultimately the cynics were trying to say, just you know what happened over there? There was actually a story over there, and they had a relationship. And as you know, this son who came out from Sarah, was actually not from Abraham, but was actually from Sarah. Okay. Why? Because look at the proof in the pudding. I mean, Sarah's together with Abraham for goodness knows how many years. Nothing happening. Clearly, Abraham's the problem because Sarah had a child. So you know what happened? There was some story that went on within the palace with Avimelech, and you know who the rightful father of Yitzchak is? Actually, Abraham is actually Avimelech. So what did God do? Sar klaster panav shel Yitzchak dome Abraham. He made the form of Yitzchak's face to be identical to Abraham. So Abraham and Yitzchak actually looked very similar. וזהו שכתוב כאן, יצחק בן אברהם היה, שהרי עדות יש, שאברהם הוליד את יצחק. And that's what this pasuk is coming to tell us. First of all, the pasuk says, ואל תולדות יצחק בן אברהם. You should know, Yitzchak was born by, was actually the son of Abraham, not Avimelech. How do you know? Because Abraham holined Yitzchak. Because you know who it was? It was actually Abraham who gave birth to Yitzchak. It was Abraham and Sarah, as opposed to someone else, as opposed to the Letzanei Hador, the scoffers of the generation, who actually said this thing or made up these stories that, you know what, there's something else going here. There was a relationship over here, and there was some story, and it was actually Avimelech who was the father of this child. Says the pasuk, Abraham holidit Yitzchak. You know what? Abraham and Yitzchak looked exactly the same. So no one had any doubt anymore once these scoffers were coming along and saying this thing. It's interesting to point out that, you'll see what you're showing me.
Baal HaTurim says Holid begimatria is dome, look like.
Correct. Baal HaTurim says Holid and dome is the same gematria. So basically it's Abraham dome et Yitzchak. So why does it say Ve'er toldet Yitzchak and Abraham follow straight away Abraham Holid Yitzchak? You know why it says it twice? Because you want to know Yitzchak ben Abraham. How do you know Yitzchak ben Abraham, not Avimelech ben Abraham? Because Abraham Holid Yitzchak. It was actually Abraham, and his face actually looked like Yitzchak, or Yitzchak's face looked like his father Abraham, which left no doubt for anyone who wants to make fun. What's interesting to point out over here is a lesson for us. And that is, you know, if you think about it, it's a little bit strange. What were these cynics trying to do? What were they trying to say? You know what? It was actually, Sarah had a baby, and it was from Avimelech, not Abraham. Guess what? Sarah was 90 years old at the time. Don't you think it's a big enough miracle? Okay, so Abraham was 100 or 99, and you know, it's not such a great miracle that it wasn't from Abraham, it would have been from Abimelech. Regardless, whatever the situation, the fact that Sarah had a baby at the age of 90 is flabbergasting. So what's this cynical language going on over here? So first of all, the concept of somebody being cynical or somebody being a scoffer. You know, we talk about letzanut achat dochem me'at hochachot. One scoff, one, you know, belittling of something can remove 100 different levels of rebuke or whatever it is. Person can get all inspired, and then one scoffer can take it away like this. You know, in fact, just remember this morning I was on a conference call with Dr. Bonnie Henry and with all the faith rabbis, the faith leaders, I suppose. And she said exactly that. She said, somebody asked her about the severity of it. There's going to be new restrictions coming out tomorrow. And so they were saying, you know, can we have some data or something that you can share with the cynics? And she said, you should know it's very, very difficult. It's a small group who are very vocal. But, you know, when you've got a small group like that who are so vocal, it's it's creating enormous challenges. And she said that she's asking the leaders, of communities to help and to explain to people how important the concept of this pandemic is very, very real, and people have to be extra careful. So this is really exactly what we're talking about. You can read something online, or one guy could just belittle it a tiny bit, and one little thing can belittle the whole thing and just throw everything away. So these scoffers, they're really just the mere fact that they're just making fun of something, whether you want to call it fake news or not, it makes no difference, but ultimately it belittles the actual thing which is spoken about. But I heard a beautiful idea from the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav says the following. He says, if you talk about miracles, a person can be inspired by miracles. But what does a miracle do to you? And the answer is, if you hear a story of a miracle, it depends what you attribute it to. So for example, you hear a story of a pilot who was flying over the Atlantic and he had to eject, he had an emergency, and he ejected and he fell directly into a ship that was passing by. Wow, miracle, crazy, by fluke, it was amazing. Okay, what does that do to you? Nothing. So what does that make you do? Does it make you do anything? Does it make you want to become a pilot? Not even sure about that. But if you hear a story of a tzaddik, or Tamid Chacham, somebody who's a righteous person or a righteous woman, and you hear that a special story happened to them, there was a miracle that happened to them, that's a mechayev. That does something to you. That means that maybe sometimes miracles happen to people who are special. So that does something for you as a person. So if you attribute it to the right thing, then that can cause you to take a lesson from it. Says the Brisker Rav, what did these people want to do? They want to say, there was a miracle, but that miracle happened to Avimelech. Okay, Avimelech was one of us, so who cares? What did it do for me? Does that mean now I have to change my lifestyle? No, I don't. But if I say it happened to Abraham, the big shouter, the person who's changing the world, the person who's going against the tide, 1 second, miracles happened to him. That means maybe something he's doing is right. So you know what? That means something for me. That's a lesson for me to learn from. Moving on. Vayhi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka. And Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, his wife, Bat Betuel ha'Arami, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramite, Mi Padan Aram, from Padan Aram, Achot Lavan ha'Arami, the brother of Lavan ha'Arami, Lo leisha, as a wife for himself. Any questions? No, everybody's okay with this pasuk? Okay, I'm not. I'll tell you what I'm not okay with. I mean, we just spent the whole last week talking about who Rivka was, exactly what her genealogy is. In fact, 2 weeks ago, or last week's shiur, we gave the background based on the end of the parasha in Parashat Vayera, which tells us the whole description, who Rivka was, who her father was, who her grandfather was, who her mother was. Sorry, not her mother, her grandmother. Who was her grandmother? Milcah, remember? That was Haran's daughter. And we spent the whole time talking about Betuel and Lavan, back and forward, where they were from Aram, from Padan Aram. Why the whole long description in this pasuk if we know all about it? So obviously, who's the first person to jump up is Rashi. So before Rashi deals with that, Rashi just wants to deal with something else. Rashi says, "Vayhi Yitzchak ben 40 shana." Why did it take so long for Yitzchak to get married? 40 years old. So Rashi just goes through a little bit of calculations. He says like this: Sharek sheba Abraham mehar Moriah, when Abraham Avinu came from Mount Moriah, from the Akedah, mitbaser shnolda Rivka, he was informed that Rivka was born. We mentioned it last week, the end of Parashat Vayera, that is the connection between the end of Parshat Vayera and the beginning of Chayei Sarah. That the reason why Sarah died was as a result of the heart attack, if you want, which she had from knowing that her son was just about to be offered up. That's what
But
we left
Yitzchak is 37 years old.
Oh, how do we know that? How do you get to number 37? Says Rashi like this. So this is Rashi's opinion. I must say that it's not accepted by all opinions, and the other opinions are less understandable based on what Rashi is going to say now. Says Rashi, Yitzchak haya ben 37 shana. Yitzchak was 37, Shari bo beperek meta Sarah, because we knew Avraham Avinu comes home from the Akedah, all happy, and he sees Sarah had just died. As a result, Rashi says, of knowing about the Akedah. Her beloved son is going to be offered up. Oops, she had a heart attack and she died. Mishanolad Yitzchak ada Akedah, from when Yitzchak was born till the Akedah, Shemeta Sarah, 37 shana. It was 137 years. Why? Ki bat Ishim hayta Yitzchak. How old was she when she gave birth to Yitzchak? 90 years old. Ubat 127 shana Shemeta. She was 127 years old when she died. So 127 minus
37.
37. So we're good.
So Rivka is 3 years old.
Oh, so 37 years old. And that means Rivka, well pregnant, then she was born straight away. That means Himtin la ashteruya libiyah. Shalosh shanim unsa'a. And that's the famous midrash that says she was 3 years old when she got married to Yitzchak. Why did he have to wait till she was 3? So it was because otherwise he wouldn't be able to. She's not someone who is fit for relations, and therefore he waited till he could marry her at the age of 3. It's interesting to note from this Rashi, it seems to be, where everybody knows that Rivka was 3 years old when she was, doing the whole thing with the camels and when Eliezer came. I mean, how do we know that? From Rashi, what he's saying over here, he only married her when she was 3 years old. Does that mean she was 3 years old when she came for the camels? So now I'm thinking about it, now I'm talking it out. Possibly, it says she comes straight away. Lavan didn't want her to come straight away. They asked for permission. Said, yep, I want to go straight away. They come, and the pasuk says straight away, he brought her to Sarah's tent. He saw she was a tzadeket. 3 miracles had come back, like her mother, and he married her. So possibly she must have been 3 years old to be able to have been married straight away, and that way we know exactly how old Yitzchak was, how old Sarah was, and how old Rivka was. So first of all, you want to know why Yitzchak is ben 40 shana when he gets married to Rivka? Is because practically he was 37, 3 years old for the marriage to be viable, and so that's 37 plus 3 is 4. Says the Rashi. Rashi continues. Bat Betuel Padan Aram Achot Lavan. The daughter of Betuel from Padan Aram. V'chi adayin lo nichtav, asked the Gemara, asked Rashi. She Bat Betuel v'Achot Lavan Padan Aram. Do we not know this already? We know she's Bat Betuel, the daughter of Betuel. We know she is Achot Lavan, the brother of Lavan. We know she's from Padan Aram. So what's the great detail all about? Ela lahagid shivcha shaya bat rasha. It's coming to tell you the praise of Rivka. Think about it. Shaita bat rasha. She had every reason not to be a righteous woman. She was the daughter of a rasha. Va'achot rasha. She had the most wicked brother, Lavan rasha. Umkoma al rasha, and the entire city was a bunch of crazies. Also, the Rashaim. And nevertheless, she still didn't learn from her dreams. And therefore, we see from here the greatness of Rivka. How it could be possible that a person can be surrounded by all sorts, but not to learn from their ways and to go against the tide and to be able to become a tzadeket, who is one of our matriarchs. Yossi is pointing out something he pointed out to me last week. The bracha which Lavan gave to Rivka before she left was Achotenu at heyi la'afer Lavan. The custom of the Sfaradim is when we put the veil over the kala before she walks to the chuppah, we give this blessing. Achotenu, at hayil el our sister, you should become basically the mother of many. Maya. Wait, so one second. So Yossi, you were saying, what was the Rashi Tevot again?
Rivka bat Betuel Arami.
Very nice.
Revava.
At hayil alfei revava. Revava is Rashi Tevot, is an acronym for Rivka bat Betuel Arami. So we know exactly where she's from. Mari wants to say something?
Yes, my question is, these points come to show that she wasn't influenced by all the negativity of her family. My question is, look, if we're saying she's only 3 years old, how much influence did she have from her family at that stage?
So that's a very, very fair point. But I think the real question is, if you're 3 years old, most likely you're not sending your 3-year-old out to the camels and feeding, hundreds of camels or tens of camels of grown men and all sorts. So clearly there's something else going on here. I think the regular explanation of such a thing is that we know the system and the way things worked in the Torah was not the same as it is today. They lived for 900 years. They were mature at a very young age. Adam and Chava, the Gemara, today's daf in Daf Yomi, we're going to do it starting in half an hour, is about Adam and Chava. The Gemara says Adam and Chava both went into the bed, and 2 people went to the bed, 4 came out. Cain and Hevel came out. So what's all this sort of stuff? And they walked out together, right? So there was a different system and breakdown. 3 years old nowadays is not someone that goes out by herself to amongst the ruffians to collect a jug of water. But clearly it was something else. So if there is that level of understanding, then clearly she was a fully grown woman. And therefore, the influence aspect is there. So Pasuk continues, Vayetar Yitzchak la'Adonai l'nochach ishto. So we know Abraham gave birth to Yitzchak. We know Yitzchak got married to Rivka at the age of 40. Now, problem is, Yitzchak's wife, Rivka, was barren. Vayetar Yitzchak la'Adonai l'nochach ishto. And Yitzchak goes and prays l'nochach ishto, opposite his wife, ki akarahi, because she was barren. Vaye'ater lo Adonai, v'tahar Rivka ishto. Says the pasuk, Hashem allowed himself to be vaye'atar, persuaded if you want. V'tahar Rivka ishto, and Rivka, his wife, became pregnant. Okay? So basically, Yitzchak prays, and she becomes pregnant. Mazal tov. Any questions on the pasuk? Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Nu Shlomo? You muted? Chance? No questions? Come on then. I've got a couple. Anyone?
Interesting fact, if you want.
Okay.
I heard that the prayer that Yitzchak did was on the Mizbeach of the Akedah.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, you reminded me. I think there's like a Balaturim or a Targum that says that. Yeah, I heard that many years ago, actually.
Rav Benaya Shmuel Nahar Shlomo.
Yeah, but no, I think you triggered a memory there. Okay. All right, very nice, interesting fact. Why? Because the Koach Tfilah, we said last week about the place has a certain element of zechut, of merit. Okay, and he wanted to evoke that memory. you speak to Meyer will tell you it's because his prayer will have more meaning if the place has meaning for the person. But I argue with him, but that's an old discussion, right? Either way, the pasuk is a little bit strange. Vayetar Yitzchak l'Adonai. First of all, lenochach ishto, opposite his wife. Do I care if it was opposite? Do I care if it was behind her? Do I care if it was in a different room? Or if she was by the Mizbeach? What do I care? The exact position of where the tefillah is. First of all, first question. Shlomo. Okay. You don't like it?
Lenochach is in the presence of. It's not necessary. Nochach. So when I count the people, say mi nochach po, who is present?
Yeah.
That's the thing. So she was present when he was praying. That's all.
Okay. We'll see. Rashi argues with you. I've got another question for you. We're talking about the first part of the pasuk. Vayetar Yitzchak l'Adonai lenochach ishto, in the presence of his wife, according to Shlomo. Ki akarahi because she's barren, and God listens. What's the last three words? Vataha Rivka ishto, and Rivka, his wife, became pregnant.
Why are they using the same verb for
Thank
different?
you, Eyal. In the first part, it says, first of all, we know exactly who Rivka is. It says lenochach ishto. So why again we're repeating Vataha Rivka ishto? It's a repetition. Or just say Vatahar. Or Vatahar ishto. Why Vatahar Rivka ishto? If you want to bring Rivka at the beginning, say Vayeta Yitzchak l'Adonai lenochach Rivka ishto. But it doesn't say that in pasuk.
Maybe
Why
it's
the reference to Rivka and to his wife again? Seemingly, it's superfluous.
it's
Sorry,
more than one wife.
Did he? We don't know about that.
I don't know, but if it says ishto, it can be maybe not Rivka, but so they wanted to make sure it's clear that it's Rivka.
It's very interesting. It's actually a very interesting point what you're saying. You know, you remind me of a point which the Netziv points out. So actually, I wasn't planning to talk about this, but I think I mentioned it last year in the class. Last year, we gave a class about Dr. Jekyll, Dr. Hyde, about Esav having this kind of confusing or dual personality. You know, he's running to Yaakov, to Yitzchak, and pretending he's this big tzaddik, and then he's going behind his back and killing all sorts and doing the worst, committing the worst sins. And then Rivka saw through his play, and Yitzchak seemingly didn't see through it. We spoke about that last year, gave a class on it. But the Netziv points out, to your point, Eyal, something very strange. You know, I mean, we mentioned last week, Abraham, whenever he had a concubine or other wives, we know about it. Yaakov, he had 4 wives, we know about it. The pasuk specifies exactly if there was other wives. Yitzchak didn't have any other wives. Yitzchak had just Rivka. There was an interesting relationship difference, though, between Abraham and Sarah, Yaakov and Rachel, his most beloved wife, and Yitzchak and Rivka. Something very strange. If you notice that Abraham and Sarah have no problem. They have a very old, very open relationship. Sarah's got a problem with Abraham. She turns around and screams at him, Chamati alecha, get rid of this kid Ishmael. I don't like him. He's ruining our son. Get him out of the house. Abraham doesn't feel comfortable until the Malach says, listen to Sarah, whatever she says. Okay? So Abraham and Sarah have this very, very mutual relationship. Rachel and Yaakov also have that very mutual relationship. Rachel has problems with Yaakov. Chamati alecha, havali banim, give me children. Whatever it is, whatever, there's a very, mutual respect between Yaakov and Rachel and between Abraham and Sarah. Yet, in this 6th parasha, we won't get to today, but if you look through, Yitzchak and Rivka have this very strained relationship. In fact, to the level that Yitzchak is blind, Rivka sees how Esav is playing games with his father, instead of Rivka turning around to Yitzchak and saying, Isaac, listen up, buddy. I love you very much, but it goes all wrong. You're blind. You can't see what's going on. This guy's playing games. We got to cut this out. No, she doesn't do that. She goes to Yaakov, take his coat, go behind his back, pretend you're him. What's the big deal? What's
I've
going on?
understood this for years.
Sorry?
That basically, Yitzchak was never the same after Moriah. He got hit in the head. He got hit in the heart. He got bashed. He was never the same human being. He suffered.
Interesting you say that. So,
He suffered trauma. I think this is me. I have no sources whatsoever.
so interesting you say that.
I think.
So I'll give
I
you a
think.
partial
I
source.
think. I think he suffered trauma that he never got over.
So there is a partial
I
source.
agree with Sam.
Okay,
100%.
so
Now,
have sources?
moreover,
I
Sam,
mean,
did you hear that?
he never.
Sam, did you hear it? I agree with you.
Okay,
Uh,
so
but
listen, Sam,
moreover,
don't get to your head because Shlomo's bringing you the one-off. Don't worry.
moreover, Rivka and Yitzchak was a shidduch.
It was an
Yeah.
organized shidduch.
Yeah, the other two fell in love somehow with each other.
Okay,
And
I can just tell
that
you.
affects the relationship.
Okay, I happen to disagree with you as well with that because I can tell you I once was in Ukraine. I was on the plane back. We went for a Shabbat Chizuk, whatever. On the plane back, a guy sitting next to me, he says to me, why are you here in Ukraine? So I said to him, there's some Jewish people over here. We came to give them some inspiration, whatever. We're there for Shabbat. And he told me why he came to Ukraine. I won't repeat it. I don't think it's appropriate for this setting. And then he tells me he comes twice a year to Ukraine. And then he tells me, so do you have a girlfriend? So I said to him, no. So he says, why not? So I told him I raised Orthodox, I was raised religious. In our circles, before we get married, that's when we start meeting girls, and we have, arranged marriages, if you want to call it. It's very, it's a whole system. He says, interesting you say that because I'm not married and I was married a few times. And I know that the divorce rate by you is much less than the divorce rate in the rest of the world. So you're clearly doing something right. So Shlomo, I beg to differ. But either way.
No, I was just saying that explains the difference. I didn't say it's better.
No, I understand.
By the way, I'd like to speak to Shlomo's point because I think he does have a point. But I've thought that they're not mutually exclusive. In other words, that image, for me, one of the strongest images in the whole Torah is when Eliezer is leading Rivka back and they see this guy in the field, right? For me, it's a very, there is love in the offing.
I'll come back to you, Sam.
No, I haven't. Oh, you want me to stop? That's fine. I can stop.
Okay. You want to finish your point? Go on. Okay. Ayal?
So there's something about Yitzchak that is different than Avraham and Yaakov. I know that they're always saying that he has some strength, but there's something about him in general that is very, I would say his personality is different. He's not really as dominant. And the fact that Rivka had to trick him is like this kind of a passive and not weak, but it's almost he's not there,
It's a very interesting point we're saying. So I'm going to come back to you, Shlomo. I'm going to come back to you, Sam. Just point out Eyal's point. It just goes a little bit off what we're saying. The truth is this whole topic is nothing what we're going to speak about. But to Eyal's point, the Rambam, Maimonides, actually has a short chapter on the breakdown of the Avot, of the patriarchs. And he said something very interesting. We know so much about Abraham Avinu's life. He went here, he went there, he had this, he had fights, he had arguments, he had milchamot, he had wars, he had issues with the kings and Paro and Abimelech. Well, lots of parashiot, all about Abraham's lifestyle and lifetime. Yaakov also. I mean, most of the second half of Bereshit, all about Yaakov. He has trouble from day one with Esav. Then he has Rachel and Leah. He has problems with Lavan. He has problems with Dinah. He has problems with Yosef. Problems with Shevatim. Problem with Paro. He goes down to Egypt. He ends up his life. All sorts. Yitzchak, we know nothing about. You know anything we talk about Yitzchak? We talk about Yitzchak, that he gets married, he has 2 children, and he gets old, and he gives the blessings. That's the 6th parasha, nothing else. The Rambam actually describes it in a one-liner. He says something like this. I can read you the Rambam if you want. Yaakov Kamenetsky points this out. He says something very interesting. He says like this. He says, Abraham Avinu, says Abraham Avinu goes from one place to the other, from one city to another. The Rambam also says nothing about Yitzchak. He says, Vayeshev Yitzchak melamed umazhir veYitzchak hodia liYaakov uminuhu lilmod. Abraham Avinu had a great kiruv organization. He taught thousands of people. Sarah taught thousands of people. Yaakov, Rambam continues, gave over the tradition to his 12 children, and he built a whole yeshiva and all sorts. Yitzchak had 1 student, and that was Yaakov. Nothing else. We know nothing else about Yitzchak. It's a very, very interesting thing and a very important factor, which you point out. What is it? Is it something to do with his personality? What is it exactly? Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky goes through a whole longer discussion over here. He said that was only in his lifetime. But if you analyze the end of the story, or the back end of the story from Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Yitzchak ultimately is considered our father more than Abraham and Yaakov, and it's got to do on the Gemara, not for now. Coming back to Shlomo's point, between Shlomo and Sam, let's go with Shlomo, and then I'll talk about Sam, because that's, I think, what the Netziv was saying. Shlomo's point was that ultimately he had some sort of trauma. So I asked you if there's any sources. So Rashi actually says that in this week's parasha, that Yitzchak becomes old, and he became old, and his eyes could not see. And Rashi points out over there, Vatechena enav mirot, pasuk aleph, chapter 27. His ayn dimmed. Rashi says, Kshene'ekad al gabei hamizbeach, and his father wanted to slaughter him on the altar. Then interesting, he says, not so much trauma, he says the angels started crying, their tears descended v'naflu al enav lefichach kahu enav. The angel's tears went into his eyes, and as a result, his eyes dimmed. Seemingly, it was vayiki saken Yitzchak. So I'm not sure why suddenly it takes effect now, but that's a very interesting point. So if there's any source of effect, whether it's physical or emotional, there is stuff around. But coming back to Sam, I think the Netziv said something very interesting about the relationship. Sam pointed out about the first encounter where Rivka actually meets her prospective match. Last week's parasha, she comes home with Eliezer, and she sees a guy. Don't forget, she's 3 years old, he's 40 years old, right? She's a guy. Vayetze Yitzchak l'soach b'sadeh, he was actually praying mincha at the time. You can imagine what sort of mincha Yitzchak Avinu, he's just establishing mincha as we're talking. And he's literally, his face is glowing, he looks like an angel. Rivka sees it, turns around to the other and says, who is that? And he says, this is your chatan, this is your groom. And she gets such a shock, she actually falls off the camel. And she covers her hair, whatever, that's the pasuk over there. The Netziv says something so fascinating. He says that first encounter was going to be the point of her marriage and kind of solidify the status of their marriage. That means, he said, because her initial reaction was of such shock and awe, she never quite got over it. And the relationship from there on was always Yitzchak, the holy malach, 40 years old, huge age difference. And Rivka, the tzaddiket, but kind of in awe of her husband. And when it came to big issues, she wasn't able to actually speak out and take it head on, like Sarah did to Abraham or like Rachel did to Yaakov, but she had to go roundabout and make sure to do it through Yaakov. Very interesting perspective. I've never seen anyone else that says it. Netziv is the only one to say it. I don't think we would be able to say such a thing if the Netziv wouldn't say it, but that's what the Netziv says. He's trying to point out that marriage in general is not supposed to be the marriage which is Sarah, Rivka, Yitzchak relationship. Marriage should be Abraham, Sarah, Yaakov, Rachel. That is correct marriage. That is a good relation, a healthy relationship between spouses. Shlomo.
I was driving today on the highway and I was thinking about the night, and I'm thinking about Yitzchak, and I'm thinking, why is he even, forgive me for saying that, one of the forefathers? Abraham is a self-made man. He struggled, he did this, he been instructed, he was supposed to sacrifice his son. Then his son suffered a trauma, like Sam said. But then he get an arranged marriage. He inherit everything that Abraham had. It says, "Vayiten Abraham et kol asher lo leYitzchak." End of story. Abraham earned it, Yitzchak get it. Yaakov built everything from scratch. Yaakov was an entrepreneur and Rachel was a partner. So that explains part of that. And then there's an issue with he's fooling around with her, for lack of a better word in English, in front of Avimelech. Again, it says Rivka ishto. Like maybe Eyal is right. Maybe he had somebody else on the side. I don't know. But and then she's making him food. She's taking Yaakov, making food to your father like he liked. He was entitled. He felt entitled. He lived entitled. He was the fact he going lasuach basadeh. He had time. He did not have to worry about making a living. He could go out in the field and pray for a wife. And he is a different kind of character altogether.
It's a very interesting point where you're pointing out. The truth is, I've never thought about it. The only person I ever saw who ever speaks about this Yitzchak's historical value, if you want, in the Torah, is almost non-existent, is the Emet Yaakov Kamenetsky. It's a very interesting point. Dan?
This was a wonderful evening tonight. I am really enjoying this evening here.
Thank you.
I'm sorry that I missed it the last 2 weeks. I couldn't come, you know why, but it was wonderful.
She only shares machot, Dan.
Amen.
Thank you. Eyal.
I want to, while we're talking, I was thinking about what Shlomo and Sam is saying. I think Yitzchak has some qualities that Avraham and Yaakov don't have. He has this kind of spiritual, or even like this kind of a person that doesn't run and develop the business, as Shlomo says, a person that is actually going in the field, think, teach one person. Look, he is the link between Avraham and Yaakov. He is the one that teaches Yaakov. But there's something about Yitzchak that is actually give you a different perspective, and you respect the fact that he is different, but it doesn't mean that he's weak.
I think you're 100% right. In fact, when we talk about the different midot of the Avot, we know Abraham is Chesed, we know Yitzchak is Gevurah, and we know Yaakov is Emet, right? Chesed is kindness. Abraham overextended himself, like we spoke about Parashat Vayera. He's prepared to go out with his bandages on the third day of the Milah, the hardest day of the Milah, to go for 3 Arabs and offer them 3 cows, tongues of 3 separate cows with, crazy amount of bread. We spoke about 2 weeks ago. But Yitzchak was the complete opposite of Abraham. Yitzchak was the guy who was Gvura. What's Gvura? I don't know how to translate Gvura in English. Debbie?
Courage.
Maybe judgment.
Courage.
Debbie, you're muted.
Bravery.
Courage.
No.
Yeah.
Judgment, yeah, but...
What about courage?
Bravery?
No.
Bravery or courage. Gumption.
Courage.
Again? Let's see if he translates over here. 1 second.
In some context, Gibor is a hero.
Strength.
A hero.
No, you want to call it strength. Gvura is strength.
Strength, but Yitzchak is din, so it's like
Yeah, it's
kind
din.
of judgment.
Correct. I agree. Bottom line is, where Abraham was not able to draw the line, if you want, Yitzchak was the complete opposite. Yitzchak is able to say, when Abraham says, I need to put you up on the altar and kill you, Yitzchak says, Hineni, I'm ready. Do what you need to do because this is God's will. Do you know what power that is? That what strength is? And he tells his father, tie me up so I don't move, just in case chas v'shalom, I'll make the korban pasul. What sort of strength is that? But there was a complete opposite midah to Abraham. Abraham is kindness. I'm so kind. I've got such a heart. I'll do anything for lowly Arabs who are of the Avodah Zarah. Yitzchak is the complete opposite. There's no nonsense. There's no monkeying around. And this is what it is. That's Gura. Yaakov was what we call the Tiferet, Midat Emet. Through the Torah that Yaakov is known as the Amud HaTorah, was able to blend both Midot. Not too much chesed, because too much chesed, you can become a people pleaser, you can become, people can step on you and abuse you, or too much Gvura, you can be very unkind, you can be heartless. The blend of those Midot is the kind of the golden middle. That's Yaakov. Yeah.
Right.
But Yitzchak basically Yitzchak is quite a tragic person because he was helpless in the Akedah and he's helpless when Rivka is stricken with Yaakov. He cannot see. Is this kind of it's a bit sad because in a way, he is in this kind of position that is a victim more than just a person that.
Okay, so I think we have to put this into
Still,
perspective.
I think you're on to something there, Ayel, but let's face it.
Sam, you're cutting out, Sam.
It's hard to hear you.
Sam, you're cutting out. I'm going to jump in just because we're tight for time, and I apologize. We mustn't forget when we talk about perspectives. There's Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and they weren't our avot for nothing, right? If Yitzchak was chosen to be one of the patriarchs, it wasn't just because he was some misken or some victim. Yitzchak Avinu was the one who established Mincha. Yitzchak Avinu was one of the avot. You know what avot? We pray every day because of the merit of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak. We don't jump over Yitzchak because he's some misken. This is something incredible. What are you showing me, Yossi?
Like few of the comments was that Yitzchak didn't do so much or all of those things, and it's incorrect because it's clearly said, "Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz vayimtza mea sha'arim, vayiyu lo miknei avoda rabba."
No, we didn't say he didn't do so much. We said compared to Abraham and Yaakov, we know almost nothing about him, and seemingly he didn't have much major hashpa'ah on the world.
No, Yossi is right. He did do, but at the same time, Yossi, he was using the same be'erot, he was redigging stuff. So he inherited a bunch of stuff that he didn't have to work for. That's all I was saying.
Some of it is like you can say maintenance, the business. It's part of the business. But regarding one other thing, if I can, regarding Rivka and the relationship. So first, I don't see any discussion between Rivka and Yitzchak at all.
Correct.
There is no discussion between them.
Ever.
And I think it's part of it is because Rivka was very tznuah, modest, or
more than Sarah and more than Rachel Leah.
Let me explain. Let me explain. So it starts from Chayei Sarah. When she came to draw the water, she came in the evening, that it's not a regular time. She didn't come in the morning because she was very tznuah. She didn't want to go in the middle of the day.
Le'et Erev. Okay.
Late Erev. So she was waiting, so there's not a lot of people to go, so not to attract people attention. And the other thing is, even when she had a problem here with the Teomim, she didn't go to Abraham, she didn't go to Yitzchak, she went to Shem. Why? Because
Modesty, yeah,
it says that she was embarrassed, maybe because she did something wrong. She was like did a sin or something.
The Radak asked this question. It's true. I respectfully disagree with you, Yossi, because to say that Rivka was more modest than Sarah, in fact, Yitzchak only married her because she was as modest as his mother Sarah.
I didn't say more modest. I didn't say more modest.
They were all tznuah. They wouldn't be the imahot, right? Again,
for sure.
Yeah, we mustn't forget who the avot and imahot are, who the patriarchs and who the matriarchs, who our marriage stands today because of them.
Yossi, I think Rivka, compared to Rachel or Sarah, is maybe the most, is the strongest, because basically she's doing something that none of them did. She's manipulating one of the fathers, and she's the one that decides that Yaakov is the right person. That's a huge thing. So I think that Yitzchak and her are so different. He maybe is not so shining, and she's very strong, but also young compared to him. I don't know.
I haven't even started what I want to say today. This is a fascinating talk. I think we went a little bit off course with regards to Rashi, but I think this is a fascinating approach.
What?
Sorry? Yeah, I'm not saying. I'm saying
you see something out of other people, Rabbi. Give it a break.
It's amazing to be able to analyze the avot and the imahot like that, and to see it from perspective which perhaps we never thought of. I think it's incredible. I think it's beautiful.
I just want to say one thing. This is my bar mitzvah parasha, so I know part of it pretty good, or most of it, but it's probably one of the more problematic parashot in the whole Torah, because of the Bechorah and because of the blessings and because of the deceiving. But a lot of it is going back to Rivka, which was a very highly political figure. She could have been humble and modest, but she knew exactly what she's doing all along the way from the time she was 3.
Correct. She was a major player in the breakdown of Klal Yisrael. It's incredible. I think we're going to have to stop here because of time constraints.
I thought it's 3 hours, Rabbi. This is the first hour.
There's so much to discuss. Okay, we're not going to have time, unfortunately. There's too much to discuss. There's too much. You just look through the first few Rashis. I think there's so many beautiful ideas. We can go on and on and on. We didn't even manage to scrape the surface. Usually, at least we scrape one layer. We didn't even scrape one. But it's I think this in itself is beautiful. So I think that in itself is enough food for thought to leave us with. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Chazak
Thank you, Rabbi. Good night.
Thank you.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Thank you.